Good evening and thank you for joining us. Election Day is finally here in Ontario. Residents have just 3 more hours to get to their polling station to cast their ballot to determine their local MPP and ultimately the Premier of Ontario. Polls opened at 9 o'clock this morning in Thunder Bay Atikokan and Thunder Bay Superior North, and there was a steady flow when we checked in at a few polling stations this afternoon. In Superior North, more than 8,000 votes were cast before the day began through advanced polls and special ballots. That's about 13% of the eligible voters. There are dozens of local voting locations around the city and the region. Voters we spoke with today say the process was straightforward and simple, with some adding that it seemed more efficient than previous elections.
Yeah, I was in and out in just a couple of minutes. It was actually very easy. They just always want piece of ID and the voter card, and I really appreciated just filling in the ballot and knowing that it got instantly electronically validated, so it was good.
It's very easy and it doesn't take long at all, and it's very efficient, and the girls in there are terrific. They're doing a good job, so lots of good volunteers.
If it's all as efficient as this, it's great.
I think everybody should vote. The process was really easy. It was simple and it was in. Throw an X on the paper and go on out.
Polling stations close at 9 o'clock, and you can stay up to date on the results from our 4 area ridings by flipping over to Global Thunder Bay, where I'll join you at various times throughout the night to keep you posted with all the latest results.
The big day comes after what can be best described as a very quiet election campaign. If the polls are correct, then it appears Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford is headed for a second straight majority government. But as Siobhan Morris tells us, much of the intrigue is over which party will make up the official opposition.
This could be a really interesting night and an interesting tomorrow as well, based on what voters decide they want to do with the NDP and the Liberal Party. Both of these parties in a really tough position here. Andrea Horwath, the leader of the NDP, in her 4th campaign as leader of that party. And it seems likely that this will be her last campaign, unless by some miracle she can build upon the party's result in the last election of 40 seats. That was the party's best finish in a generation. And because we know that the PC party seems likely to add to their seat count, it's hard to figure out a way to make the math work that the NDP also improves on its result. The Liberal leader, Stephen Del Duca, also in a tough position, really in a dogfight to win his own riding. He's in a close contest with a PC candidate there. So there will be questions about whether he gets to continue on, even if the Liberal Party improves upon their result from just 7 seats in the last election. We did hear Stephen Del Duca say yesterday that he's not going anywhere, but again, depending on the way the votes fall tonight, maybe people in the Liberal Party will have other ideas.
Well, that was CTV's Siobhan Morris. To other news now, Thunder Bay Police provided updates today on 2 violent incidents that happened over the last 48 hours. A 19-year-old man was murdered on Shipley Street yesterday morning. That came soon after an aggravated assault on May Street. Police also addressed the spike in homicides after 4 of them over the last 30 days. Basilios Bellows reports.
The scene at the homicide on Shipley Street is expected to be held for the time being, as an autopsy of the young victim is not taking place until Friday in Toronto. Police have wrapped up their probe at a Brock Street residence that is related to the murder, though police have not specified how exactly the 2 homes are connected. But police do say the killing was not random.
The incident occurred at Shipley. Brock Street is related to the investigation. I can't get into more detail at this point, as we're pending search warrants. It was related to the drug trade. But it is not random in nature.
Ryback went on to say a suspect has been identified, but he could not provide any further information. An update was also given about the violent assault Wednesday night on May Street, as a 22-year-old Toronto man is now in custody.
He will be appearing before the courts tomorrow morning in relation to an aggravated assault. And our forensic unit has completed the scene and it has been released.
Police say the assault involved a blunt object and that the victim is currently in the ICU in stable condition. Over the past 30 days, there have been a number of violent incidents in Thunder Bay, including 4 homicides. Detective Inspector Jeremy Pearson was asked about the string of tragedies and whether they're all connected.
In a number of the homicides and a number of the violent incidents, we have indication that the illicit drug trade is a factor in those interactions. There's no indication to us that any of these incidents are related to one another. So in terms of an overarching pattern, we have to approach each investigation as an individual investigation. We have to devote the appropriate resources to it.
With an autopsy scheduled for Friday for the victim of the Shipley murder, it is expected police will release more information in the coming days. Looking at the May Street assault, the name of the Toronto man in custody will be released after the charges are sworn in before the courts. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
The Police Act hearing for 2 Thunder Bay police officers who investigated the 2015 death of Stacey DeBungy has been adjourned until next week. Day 4 of the hearing was a short one as lawyers for both sides discussed whether certain witnesses were required to testify. Staff Sergeant Sean Harrison and Detective Sean Whipple both faced charges of neglect of duty and discreditable conduct. During today's proceedings, lawyer Asha James, who represents the DeBungy family, made her case for bringing in former OIPRD Director Jerry McNeely to testify. But adjudicator Greg Walton decided because the broken trust report is already part of the agreed statement of facts, there's no need for McNeely to be called as a witness. The hearing will resume on Monday with testimony from the private investigator hired by the DeBungy family to look into Stacey's death. Harrison and Whipple are also expected to testify next week.
As many people know, Thunder Bay has been hit hard by the opioid crisis. Local officials are now watching closely after British Columbia was granted an exemption from Ottawa to some laws surrounding illicit drug possession. The exemption, which goes into effect in January, decriminalizes possession of less than 2.5 grams of some illicit drugs. Thunder Bay drug strategy lead Cynthia Olson says decriminalization is being discussed here as well with partners across the province. She says while municipalities in this region could also apply for exemptions, collaboration may be needed.
Because as you can imagine, if you decriminalize and your framework for doing so in Thunder Bay looks different than in Dryden, just as an example, that would be really challenging.
Olson emphasizes that decriminalization will not solve the opioid crisis, but says it's a big move toward recognizing substance use as a health issue. She says that's just one of a host of strategies, including prevention, that are needed to address the crisis.
While much of Ontario focuses on the provincial election, residents in Fort Frances are watching water levels rise on Rainy Lake and the Upper Rainy River. The flooding has already surpassed levels seen in 2014 and will soon break the all-time record set back in 1950. Adam Riley reports.
It's definitely uncharted territory. We've never been here before.
Those words are a repeating theme in Fort Frances as the community continues to battle rising floodwaters. Last week, crews began shoring up sandbag defenses in some of the low-lying areas along Front Street in an effort to protect infrastructure and homes. And while those defenses were overrun, they delayed waters long enough to build a secondary line, which is so far held. Mayor June Call, who has been helping fill sandbags for the last week, remains defiant against the rising waters, but acknowledges how unpredictable the situation is.
You just wait and see what's coming next, right? You can't really plan at this point in time. You just kind of second guess yourself. We know that the water is going to continue coming for some time. We know it's supposed to get higher here as the days go on. So we just keep putting sandbags by any place that we feel is necessary to secure the land and build on top of that if we have to.
Fire crews from the MNRF and volunteers continue to fill sandbags, this time at the former Shevlin Woodyard, a mere 500 meters from the front lines. As well, the town has pulled the Hallett tugboat completely out of the water to prevent it from floating downstream towards the dam. Operations and Facilities Manager Travis Robb says as of Tuesday, water levels were within 3 inches of the record 339.23 meters set in 1950, and by Thursday or Friday of this week, will end up breaking the 72-year record. As a result of changes made to the area since all of the previous floods, it's near impossible to tell how the area will be affected.
We're really in uncharted territory. We don't really know how the upper river level is going to respond, how our infrastructure is going to respond, which areas are going to be the most affected or the least affected. So we're really kind of just trying to monitor everything and respond where we think we need to be to stay ahead. 3
areas of concern include the Frog Creek area, the Ildewill Drive area, and the aforementioned Front Street, which has been closed to heavy truck traffic. Also monitoring the situation are officials with the La Vérendrye Hospital, which is located less than 300 meters from the flooding. While the main hospital remains relatively safe as it sits a further 5 feet above the current water level, There are some other properties the hospital owns that are at risk.
We have a contingency group that is meeting on a regular basis that we're watching as the water comes up, and we're making sure that we're going to have enough assets in place or plans in place to direct our residents and all our staff out of the facility if need be.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Turning to the pandemic now, there's no change to the number of COVID-19 patients at the Regional Health Sciences Centre. There are still 18 patients in hospital for the second day in a row, and for the third straight day, there are no COVID patients in the ICU. The hospital's occupancy rate has dipped below 103%, while intensive care is 86% full.
Ontario's right to disconnect policy takes effect today. Employers in the province with more than 25 staff members are now legally obligated to have a policy allowing employees to switch off from work-related communications when they aren't working. That means workers aren't required to answer things like emails, phone calls, video calls, and other messages outside of their working hours. The legislation was introduced after remote and hybrid work became more common during the pandemic.
Lakehead University's 57th convocation opened today with an online ceremony celebrating the class of 2022 and conferring honors and honorary degrees. A new chancellor has also been installed. Incoming Chancellor Dr. Rita Shelton-Deverell will fill the role for a 3-year term. She'll award all degrees given out by the university during that time. She also presented 3 honorary degrees in today's ceremony to former MPP and Liberal leader Lynn McLeod, longtime AFN National Chief Perry Bellegarde, and educator Carl Subban.
Know what you care about, decide what needs to be done next, and take small steps in the right direction to make a difference. I ask of you as today's graduates that you stay aware and engaged participants in your new environments, and that you remember always that you can make a difference.
Please know that Indigenous peoples are living in our traditional territories in towns and in cities across Canada. We're your neighbors, we're your relatives. You, the class of 2022, as you go forward into your future, you can be central in a turning point in this country's history and world history.
One piece of advice, don't forget where you have been. I have not forgotten my time at Lakehead University because it defined me and strengthened my foundation for moving forward. You can't know where you're going until you know where you have been.
Lakehead's Civitas Award was presented posthumously to Robert and Quinnifer Brown, and longtime public servant Cameron Clark was made a Fellow of the university. The majority of the 2022 graduating LU students will receive their degrees in ceremonies held throughout the day tomorrow.
June is Pride Month, and to kick things off yesterday, the Thunder Bay Catholic School Board and Lakehead Public Schools hosted flag-raising events. The boards joined local pride groups to acknowledge and embrace the differences and similarities which make everyone unique. Mitchell Ringos has more.
The pride flag was once again raised outside the Catholic District School Board office. The annual flag raisings began there in 2019, and officials say they were the first Catholic school board to do so in Ontario. Plenty of locals turned out to show support in their pride colors, which Director of Education Pino Tassoni says shows just how far their schools have come. But he does say they still have work to do.
I got very emotional today just listening to our students speak, and you could see, and they talked about their journey and the support that they received from us, and knowing where they're at, and they feel welcomed and cared for when they come into our schools. It makes us very proud as a school board.
It's just crazy how much love and support we have now, and it's how far we've made it with the Catholic School Board. Never when I was in grade 6 did I think this was going to happen.
Lakehead Public Schools also raised their pride flag on Wednesday and once again led the way with the new Progress Pride flag. The public board had the first high school in Thunder Bay to raise a pride flag at the former Sir Winston Churchill. Lakehead Director of Education Ian McCrae says it shows the dedication that the board has put towards leading the charge in inclusion, and he's certain this will continue after his retirement.
As I said prior, it's a case of we believe that all students and all people belong with us. And that's the tenet that we will always follow. There's no backing off of that.
Both Thunder Pride Chair Valentino Donoso and Rainbow Collective of Thunder Bay President Jason Veltri say providing supports for students here is more important than ever in the age of social media, as they are witnessing in many places a rollback of rights for LGBTQ2SIA individuals, and that Canada should continue to be a leader in the movement going forward.
To be able to see that even though in other parts of the world this is not happening yet, we have come along a huge path and we can get there. So this is inspirational to other countries.
So doing these flag raisings and speaking up and speaking out as students means that we still remain vigilant to the risks involved that students and queer, trans, and two-spirit people face every day.
Mitchell Ringos, TBT News.
And what a fantastic way to kick off